Good morning, everybody. It's Martin live from the Sales Strategist Studios here in the lovely Yarra Valley. It's a lovely day outside. But before I go and enjoy the sunshine, I'm joined today by the amazing Josh Gold, who is the Managing Director and owner of Scafflink. Good morning, Josh.
Hey, Martin. Good to be here.
Nice to have you on the show this morning, Josh. And so we're going to spend the next 30 minutes or so talking about scaffolding, talking about sales, and talking about your passion in the market. And, scaffolding, a lot of people that tune into the show are in the building construction industry. Scaffolding, Josh, it's an unusual business to get into. How did that happen? How did you end up in the scaffolding business, Josh?
So it's funny. I didn't do so well at school, but that was mostly because I just didn't apply myself, and I knew I'd be out there working, and I really enjoyed working, and I got a labouring position at Scafflink, and that was like 18 years ago, and to be honest, it was because I'd gone from like retail earning $7 an hour to construction. It was nearly double the rate, and I got to work outside, and I got to use my hands, and it was like all these pluses. I was like, how does this work? How am I getting paid more? I thought there's got to be a catch, but it was and then from there, I've.
So you got in it for the money, Josh?
I did.
Fantastic. And so how did that transition come about? Because now you're the owner of the business, so you started working at Scafflink. When did it, because to make that leap from working for a business to actually buying it is a big leap. So when was it that you knew that, hey, look, scaffolding is actually now more than about the money. It's about something that I love to do. Tell me about that.
It's funny because at the time, I don't think it was a very conscious decision at the time, but for me, like, it's actually a real ideal thing for me to be in, because like I went from like I was laboring, and then I was a scaffolder, then I was a leading hand, and then someone said they're short a truck driver, and I was like, I'll do that. I was just hungry to learn anything, and then after it was only like 4 years, and I'd pretty much done every like operations role in the company. Like I'd done dispatch, I was labor manager, and it was just because anytime there was a position open, even if I was doing well in the position I was in, I was looking for more to learn and more to do. And so, and then by like 2008, when the GFC hit in 08 or 09, I was the general manager of like operations, running everything operations wise. And at the time, the owners got into like a bit of cash flow trouble, like I think a lot of people did. And there was a couple of other people buying in as shareholders, and Zara and I, my wife, we put our hands up and said, hey, we're interested, and ended up buying in just at a real low level. And then we sort of had the golden handcuffs on, where we were sort of tied to the business. But it didn't take long, and I started to get bored again. I was like, what's the next step? And the next step wasn't up, because there was an owner there and there was a CEO that wasn't going anywhere. And so I was actually looking at, we had a lot of restrictions on what we could do, what I could do as operations manager, as far as how the business was run. And one of the things was that we had to use contractors over a certain value.
Yeah, like, right.
We could only do our own labor up to a certain amount, and then it went to contractors. And so the contractors at the time I saw were really inefficient, unreliable. It was adding to my problems, like that I was sort of responsible for. And opportunity came up, and I said, like, I'm thinking I actually want to go start my own labor hire company. Long story short, I ended up doing that while still running, staying at Scafflink at the same time, but then started up Quick As Scaffolding, which was our own labor. And then from there, we ended up buying out all the 5 different business partners over a 10-year period, as each of them wanted to do other things, or yeah, we're happy to get paid out, and
it's been smooth sailing ever since, right, Josh?
2000
That's the laugh of a business owner right there, Josh.
yeah, it was interesting because 2018 was when we bought the last business partner out, and we were like, "This is great. We can do all the things we want to do," but we just outlaid a lot, so it took a little bit of time to build that cash flow back up to be able to do that. But yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, awesome. And I think the thing about scaffolding, because I've got a bit of a construction background as well, is that you got to be on the money, right? Because you put wonky scaffolding up, can come crashing and you can kill someone.
Hmm.
So what's your, because I know that you have a superpower, which is, doing weird and unusual constructions on all types of terrain. But, what makes, and we were talking about that a couple of years ago and we did a little bit of work together, but in regards to safety, how does that factor into the work you do at Scafflink?
Yeah, well, even now, like it's like one of the most recent like safety audits by like Queensland Government Department of Workplace Health and Safety, 51% of scaffolds were non-compliant. And this is after like we've had not so much in Queensland, but like there's been incidents within Australia, in New South Wales and other states where people have died, and like this is after crackdowns have happened. And so it really points out like there's so many scaffold companies out there that don't know what they're doing. And
So
so
51% of scaffolding in Queensland is non-compliant. Is that what I just heard?
just of the ones that they did the inspections on.
So what makes a scaffolding non-compliant?
The book that's like this thick. So we have Australian standards, then we have our code of practice, we have all that. But and some of them, the degrees of non-compliance vary, but for us, like our only like Scafflink, our only job is safety. Because when you think about it, like it could be done another way. Like you can use a lot of different other things, but basically when scaffold's used, it should be that, well, that's the safest option of gaining access. And so when we're not leaving a product behind, like we are that temporary installation, it should be perfect. It should be perfect every time.
It should be. So why isn't it?
And that's I tried to change the industry, and then to be honest, we ended up moving out of the bottom end of the market because there's a lot of I think a lot, even if we have the conversations with clients about the safety, then it takes them taking it to their client, say the owner or whoever's buying the house, and it becomes a competition thing for them. And if they don't want to have the tough conversation on why it costs a little bit more, then they're just going with the cheapest quote. And it's only if something goes wrong that there's a consequence.
So what you're saying is that there's scaffolding companies out there and they just want to whack it up quick, do the cheapest price. The only way they can do a cheap price is to cut corners, which then in turns make for a scaffolding that may stay up, but it may not. And so basically people are taking potluck chances with lives.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, wow.
Exactly right.
So you've got a duty of care, Josh.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I like to transition a little bit into sales because that's what the show is a little bit about. And we did some work, a small amount of work about 18 months ago. But it's off air earlier. I think one of the interesting things I'd like to start with is that I'm always talking about customer selection. And you mentioned earlier on that you select your customers and make sure there's a value alignment. Which is a great way of selecting customers. So I'd like you to talk to a little bit about values alignment and how you select customers based on values.
Yeah. And so it's an interesting one because it's sort of like when you interview somebody, like say someone's going for a job with you, and if you say, are you this, this, and this, Well, they say, yes, I am, because they want the job.
Mm-hmm.
So figuring out if someone's on the same values has to be sort of not covert, but you have to ask the right questions and interpret the answers. And a lot of it comes down to gut. Like so many times in the past, you've got a gut feeling. You're like, oh, this guy seems like he'll be a nightmare to work for. And you take a step back, and if you actually look at the evidence, you're like, yeah, well, the jobs run like shit, and if he's this disorganized at the start, when he's trying to bring us onto the job, why would he then get better? It's more likely he's actually going to be worse when we start working together. So all that stuff. But yeah, so customer selection, we used to just quote for everyone, like pretty much every quote request that came through. And not only the amount of time you spend quoting that, but just the time that then you spend following up, and then also like winning jobs that don't really align with you. And yeah, we talked about the hamster wheel, and it's exactly right. It just, you end up on this cycle, and you're so busy that you don't really
So what are those things? So when you're talking about values alignment, so I get it. And yeah, you're right. You know, most salespeople know before they start dealing with somebody that the guy's going to be or the girl, the company they're about to work with, is going to be a pain in the ass. They sign them up anyway, and then they send you broke or bald or both. But when you're having those initial type of conversations before you probably even get to the investment proposal stage, what are you looking for? What type of signals are you looking for from the customer that says to you, okay, you've ticked that box, and now I'm prepared to go to the next step with you? What are those things? What are those feelings that you want from the customer?
It'll be gauging where they're at with the issues they have, and whether safety is up there on that list, whether they're price driven. And some of it's even just a matter of shock. Like we say, like, we're a premium product, we're not for everyone. We've got to run through a few questions to see if we're a good fit for each other. If you're just looking for the cheapest price, then that's not for us. Or that's not us, that we don't compromise on safety. And yeah, basically save us both some time.
I love that. I love that script, Josh. I wonder where you got that from. But so I'm interested as to, so when you say that to customers, because there's a lot of businesses out there that are maybe starting down that pricing type script, what reaction do you get?
Sometimes it's like, well, sometimes they'll say straight away, oh, well, I've got 3 prices already, and I'm just after a 4th. You're like, well, thank you. It's like, we're not going to be the cheapest, and yeah, thanks for your time.
Swipe left.
Or goodbye. Like, and you move on. And the thing is, that alone, narrowing that down and moving on to the people that are actually aligned, the time savings and which converts to dollars is massive.
Awesome. Now, when we started working together, the one thing that you were across, you and Zara both, were your metrics around conversion rates. You're one of the few businesses that I work with which measured and monitored their conversion rates on a monthly, weekly basis, which I thought was absolutely amazing. So step of the head. And at that time, you had one salesperson. You're about to scale up to a second salesperson, and in the subsequent 18 months or so, your business model has changed completely. So I'm interested, and you shared with me a few really interesting statistics before. So I'm interested, the change from 1 to 2 salespeople to where you are now. What inspired that shift?
Yeah. So we were looking at it, and it's funny, until I didn't have time at the time to take a step back, and we had all the data, but I hadn't processed it properly to figure out, well, who's actually our most profitable clients and what are our most profitable jobs. And I broke it down, and it actually came about to work out labor had gone up, transport had gone up, everything had been going up, and we hadn't really changed our rates for a little while. and added it all up. And if we brought in all the time for quoting to drafting to follow up to credit applications, if we sort of broke it down and contributed a bit to every quote, it worked out a minimum charge for a job to make anything, including insurance, risk, and liability. It was like $6,000, but our average sale was like $3,500. And so, yeah, and it wasn't that we were.
You really love scaffolding, don't you, Josh?
Yeah. And it wasn't that we were losing 2.5 on every job. It was like some of those were just ongoing, where one sale was 2,500, and then it was that every fortnight for the whole year. So like we made up for some efficiencies, but it pointed out to us a lot that, especially with new work, new clients, and even just the risk on the smaller scale jobs where you have 1 half-day rain delay or this or that, it can really blow out, and all of a sudden we were spending 80% of our time on the clients that brought in like 20% of our revenue.
So you figured out, right, so our break even is 6 and our average job size is 3.5. What happened next?
So straight away we went to, okay, well, for any new clients, our minimum was 10,000. And the reason that buffer in there was because, well, we made the conscious decision to go, okay, well, where do we want to be? We want to be in a more niche market of more complex jobs, and we need less jobs if they have a higher value, but also we can service those jobs at a higher level with the resources, with the exact same resources. And then, as well as that, like we didn't have the extra sales reps as well. We made the decision, okay, well, quoting a massive amount and having to win large volume, it was like, well, we can be a lot more efficient at a smaller scale.
So you actually deselected your 2 sales talent?
Yeah, one of them deselected, and the other one we deselected.
Nice. Yeah. And so then it was back to yourself, and you said your operations manager, doing the proposals and doing the quotes. So you had an epiphany. You said, right, okay, so now we're going for $10,000 jobs. We've got a niche, which is customers, more difficult jobs, because your superpower is, jigsaws and putting stuff together. You got a unique brain the way you work, that's for sure. I've seen it in action. And so then you went to market, and just interesting, because we were sharing before. I asked you, no, it's going to give it away. But so you got to that stage, and so then you started outreaching you changed your outreach strategy. How did that work?
Yeah, and that was the thing. Everything got so much more efficient. And I think, to be honest, I'd never actually focused on sales strategy before. Before that, it was just like, it wasn't broken necessarily. We didn't change it. And, but once we started really dialing into it, it was applying the same amount of time, just targeting a specific market. So a lot of the actual, like the tools and resources, like where we get our work, didn't change. Like we've got the online, like Builder Trend and like subscription services, which tell us where the tenders are. We did put a bit more into social media, and we've backed off that a little bit recently because we were getting so many leads and requests that weren't in our target market. And as we were starting to do more of those jobs, it's sort of like, well, we have to do some more of those to give the to have the content.
So 18 months ago, Josh, your average job size was 3,500.
Yeah.
What would your average job size be 18 months later?
We're at like 16,000 now, but it's going up steeply. It's continuing to go up because, just as we move towards the bigger jobs.
And you believe this is due primarily to, obviously, your change in strategy, but selecting the clients that you've chosen to select. You've got a clear criteria on who you want on board.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
And we were talking about the 80-20 rule earlier as well, and how that impacted on your business. So if you looked at the 80-20 rule before you made these changes, I think you said you were putting like 80% of your effort into 20% of your customers.
Yes.
But now you're putting, 80% of your work into the top 20, right? So you're able to spend more time with each customer.
Yeah, exactly.
Which makes a great degree of sense.
Yeah, and our turnover's like halved from like 5 million to like 2.5, but our profit stayed the same. Like net profit has stayed the same, not as a percentage, like the actual amount.
So you made the same amount of return.
Yeah.
You've saved a lot of costs. The stress. So what a great business model. And I think one of the key metrics for me is that I asked you before. So back in 18 months ago, what was approximate percentage of customers that you had as repeat customers? And you said to me 18 months ago, repeat customers were around about 30%.
Yeah, correct.
Now, 18 months later, Josh, what's your repeat customer ratio?
We're like 70%. And like some months we're in like 90, 100%. Because some months we don't have room and we're turning away jobs for any new clients. Like anyone that wants something straight away. So yeah, it's between 70 and 100 on between different months.
So what great customer selection process is, and what a great customer experience you give. And for anyone listening out there, like the impact of this can't be understated, because back when Josh had a 30% re-engagement of his clients every year, you had to fill up your pipeline with 70% of your customers. And based on the number you gave me, you had to find around $3.5 million worth of new business every single year because your attrition rate was so high. But now you're only getting a fall off rate of maybe 20%. And in some months it's nothing at all. I mean, what a great business model you now have.
Yeah. And some back when we were at the like 30%, some of those clients would have worked with us again, but because we were so spread over and quoting everything, we were like locking in jobs, and then it was like they'd come to us and say, okay, we got this job ready, and we couldn't supply because we weren't factoring in, they're going to be ready in a couple of weeks. We were too spread and not looking at not as much connection with the client at the time.
Yeah. And this is a message, doesn't matter if you're in scaffolding, doesn't matter if you're hairdressing, doesn't matter if you sell equipment, doesn't matter what you're in. This is a great message for everybody because, 18 months ago, you knew your numbers, you had your metrics, and you made decisions based around your metrics. You then changed your business model and changed your outreach strategy to a point now where, okay, your revenue has gone down, but your profits as a percentage of your revenue have gone through the roof. So, great stuff. And, if you look back over the last 18 months or so, what are your biggest learnings and lessons around your sales process?
Definitely. I mean, the customer like filtering and selection at the start, definitely massive. And then asking the right questions. So like going through using like the sales matrix, but asking the right questions and digging down to what the real issues are. Because if you can find what the client's issues are and really identify something that someone else hasn't, then you're showing that like we know what your issue is and this is how we're going to solve it. And if they're not getting that often from somebody else, well, it takes them off the table. All of a sudden it's a conversation with just you.
Yeah. And so what you're doing is you're demonstrating expertise. You're showing them your shit. And in the building game, it doesn't matter what game you're in, you're right. You're then parking everybody else as people that sell differently, but now they're in the the presence of an expert, which is you and Scafflink,
Hmm.
and also price generally goes away because they just want to deal with you.
Yeah. And generally, like and that's where I thrive, is when I have that information, I can customize like a solution that has that in mind. And for us, with like jobs that are like public access or in existing buildings, hospitals, shopping centers, it's figuring out, well, often the builder's biggest problem is dealing with like the center management, or that people are going to be working around. And it's like, well, sometimes nobody else sees it, where it's like, well, we can take part of this out of the equation, where all of a sudden we're out of the areas of the public by, suspending a scaffold from the ceiling rather than bringing it from ground up, or coming in at night and having all the work done before the day, even though it might seem like it's more costly up front. If it alleviates and gets rid of all these other issues, if you're the one to bring the solution, then most people will then work with you to fine tune it and go ahead with the job.
Yeah. And so how do you handle it? I'm a customer of yours. You've sent me a pricing proposal, and it's a $30,000 scaffolding job. And I come back to you and I say, hey, Josh, this is all looking okay, but what can we do about the bottom line here, Josh? How can we get that down? What's your response?
Oh, we don't negotiate, but generally it's which part, you tell me which part you want to cut off, and I'll cut that off. And usually it's, all I need it all. And I said, well, if you need it all, you've got the price for it all.
Great. And do you have, I presume, and that technique that you use, that works obviously fairly effectively?
Yeah. And what's good is, especially with the repeat clients, you don't have to have the same conversation over and over and over and over, whereas if your client retention rate's not high, you're repeating yourself, and that's where the filter of the clients at the start narrows down, and you get a higher success rate at the end with this. But I use it even when I sell stuff on Gumtree, like selling a couch or a cabinet, and people say, I'll give you $100. I'm like, okay, yes, no problem. Which half would you like? I'll cut it. Because it's good to have a bit of fun.
It is a lot of fun. And, I love that. And that's the power of framing, because you hit it in a nutshell. If you set the frame with your customer early on, we don't negotiate, this is what we're going to take out, then every time they come back to you, they're not going to go back, because you've got a firm boundary. It's like a child. A child will keep pushing the boundary until you give in, or they realize that they're constantly beating their head against a brick wall.
Yeah.
Same
and
thing.
Like, one of the first things we say is that we're not the cheapest, and we're not for everyone. So, but then
love how you own that, Josh.
Hmm.
Now, Josh, I know it's going to be a great shock to you, but time's nearly up already. 11:28. We've been going for 28 minutes. This time's just flown. But look, if there's anyone out there that wants to deal with an absolute guru in scaffolding, someone that can make the most difficult projects simple, but you're prepared to pay for it too, aren't you, people? How do they get in touch with Josh and the team at Scafflink?
So the website's scafflink.com.au, and we're Scafflink Scaffolding on Facebook and Instagram, starting up on LinkedIn again. But website, Facebook, Instagram.
Awesome, Josh. Been lovely to chat with you today. And to everyone else out there, this is going to be the last Tuesday event for a while. Next week, we're going to come on. We're going to start doing a few events leading into the new financial year on tips about how to set and get your sales budget in order. So until the next time, from my sales heart to yours, remember, a sales fit business is a healthy business. See you all very, very soon.